Welcome to Hebrews chapter 7, and I'm really looking forward to this. In some ways, we've been held in suspended animation. If we go back to chapter 5, it was beginning to talk about Melchizedek, and then the writer to the Hebrews realizes that this is going to be some tough stuff. So he takes us down a process of maturation, helping us to go on from elementary things to think a little bit more deeply. But we're back with Melchizedek now, so we can pick up from where we were in Hebrews 5:10 and where we were at the end of chapter 6. When it said that Jesus has entered on our behalf, he's become a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Now, that last chapter, I was talking about limitations, vulnerabilities, and a promise to hold on to. In this one, I'm talking about basically a necessary change in the priesthood. And we're going to see why it was necessary to change the priesthood. So let's pick up. I'm going to read from verse 1 of Hebrews 7. This Melchizedek was king of Salem and priest of God Most High. He met Abraham returning from the defeat of the kings and blessed him. And Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. First, the name of Melchizedek means king of righteousness. Then also king of Salem means king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. I'm going to pause there because unless you know this story in Genesis 14, which is verses 18 to 20, you might be a little bit mystified. Abraham had been out to rescue Lot, and he's coming back from the battle. It was a battle of the kings. And he meets the king of Sodom, but he also meets the king of Salem, who's Melchizedek. And we have all of the facts there that are given to us in Genesis 14, except the fact that we're told here that Melchizedek was without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God. He remains a priest forever. And for that reason, some people actually would say that the Melchizedek that appears in Genesis 14 was probably a Christophany, a sort of pre-incarnation appearance of Jesus. Now, that may be so, that may be not. We don't have to go down that route. But it does give us a sense of how God is planning in the Old Testament all the things that he's bringing into the New Testament. And the fact that there needs to be a change of priesthood, he's already established a priestly line that's based on someone who is like a living forever person, which is quite incredible. So we move on. So this is what it says in verse 4. Just think how great he was. That's Melchizedek. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the plunder. So that's the first example of tithing, really. And it says this, now the law requires the descendants of Levi who became priests to collect a tenth from the people. That is from their fellow Israelites, even though they also are descended from Abraham. So there's an interesting thing going on here. It's basically saying, hold on a minute, those who collected the tithe from the Israelites had already, in a sense, given to this greater one through Abraham. So it goes on like this. This man, however, did not trace his descendants from Levi, yet he collected a tenth from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. That's amazing. Abraham had the promises, but Melchizedek was the one doing the blessing. And without doubt, the lesser is blessed by the greater. In the one case, the tenth is collected by people who die, but in the other case, by him who is declared to be living. One might even say that Levi, who collects the tenth, paid the tenth through Abraham, because when Melchizedek met Abraham, Levi was still in the body of his ancestor. It's an interesting way of looking at it. But it's not making a point about tithing here. It's making a point about understanding that we're moving from the lesser to the greater. If we're coming to a priesthood that's after the order of Melchizedek, it's going to be a greater priesthood, a far more significant priesthood than that which gave the tithe all those years ago to Melchizedek. That's the point that's being made. And the blessing too comes from the greater to the lesser. So it's really establishing this reality that God always had in mind, going right back to Abraham's time, that there would be another priesthood. Even though the initial priesthood hadn't been established, there was a greater priesthood that was on its way. And it talks about the king of righteousness and the King of Peace. And what more could we say than that? You see, Jesus isn't just one who has eternal life, although that's expressed here, but he's also the King of Righteousness and the King of Peace. Isn't this incredible? I just get amazed with Hebrews. It really is just, hey, God sowed so many seeds and types and figures into the Old Testament, and we're sort of like reaping the benefit, all of them, in this amazing letter. So let's read on, because he spells it out for us better than I can. It says this in verse 11. If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, and indeed the law given to the people established that priesthood, why was there still need for another priest to come? One in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron. Simple argument is basically saying God's interested in perfection. There was a priesthood, the Aaronic priesthood, that was established from the tribe of Levi. It didn't bring perfection, but God had already got a plan that there would be another priesthood that could bring that perfection that the Aaronic priesthood was never able to bring. So we read on. For when the priesthood is changed, the law must be changed also. He of whom these things are said belonged to a different tribe, and no one from that tribe has ever served at the altar. For it is clear that our Lord descended from Judah, and in regard to that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. And what we have said is even more clear if another priest, like Melchizedek, appears, one who has become a priest not on the basis of a regulation as to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of an indestructible life. Oh, I'm getting this. I hope you are too. That the ancestry thing is great, and Aaron passed on all the way down through the generations, year after year, right the way down through. But when it comes to the succession of the Melchizedek line, it's totally different, because we're talking about a line that's not based on ancestry, but of an indestructible life. So we have Melchizedek and we have Jesus, and that's it. So that's the order of Melchizedek. And it says this, it's declared, and we've already looked on this is in Psalm 110, verse 4. You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Now, I believe that was said in eternity. I know it's recorded in Psalm 110, but it's like the psalmist sort of eavesdropped on heavenly conversations, as we find in Psalm 2 between the Father and Son, and we're going to find in other psalms as well. These conversations that took place in eternity that are being fulfilled in our time are just incredible. So it says this, the former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless. For the law made nothing perfect. And a better hope is introduced by which we draw near to God. And it was not without an oath. Others became priests without an oath. But he became a priest with an oath when God said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. Isn't this incredible? Now, let's just unpack this a little bit, because this is quite strong. It says the law made nothing perfect. Well, that is true. And then it goes on, and it's still pursuing this idea that what God is looking for is a perfection. And a better hope is introduced to us by our ability to draw near to God. So although the Aaronic priesthood was about bringing people close to God, it's only this priesthood in Jesus that actually brings us into God's presence. And then he says that moment when God confirmed it, God the Father confirmed to his Son, you are a priest after the order of Melchizedek. It was a much stronger sending. It was a word and an oath, if you like, that was a double confirmation of what was on God's heart. And so Jesus has become, it says, a guarantor, this is verse 22 of this chapter, a guarantor of a better covenant. Now, a guarantor is someone who underwrites it. So the reality is that Jesus is underwriting everything that we have. Moses was a mediator that went into the presence of God. Jesus came from the presence of God, and he's still our mediator. So there's a greater strength in this new covenant because Jesus is our guarantor. Now, there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing office. So many in the Aaronic priesthood by the time we get to this point in Hebrews. So many from Aaron right down to what was then the present day. But because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Just think about that. In the old covenant, you'd have a priest. He'd be praying for you, he'd be concerned about you, but then he'd die. Then who's going to intercede for you? You're dependent upon the next one coming along to pick up the responsibility. But we're told that Jesus ever lives. Part of his responsibility in heaven is to intercede for us. We have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous, we're told. And that advocacy involves him actually interceding on our behalf. He speaks up for us. We're told in Ephesians that we're blessed with every well-speaking in the heavenly places. That's what that word blessing means there. It's well-speaking. And Jesus is always speaking well of us. We need an advocate in the courtroom like Jesus. A good advocate will speak you up. And that's what Jesus does for us. And he prays for us. He's there to sustain us and uphold us. So what else does the writer to the Hebrews say? And this is where I love this chapter. I know we've already looked at chapters where we find that there's a warning. Stay on track, stay on track, stay on track. This chapter goes beyond the warning. And it shows us that Jesus is there for us in a very special way. I know we've already met this before, but listen to this. Such a high priest as Jesus, truly meets our need. One who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests men in all their weakness, but the oath, which came after the law, appointed the Son, whom has been made perfect forever. We've talked about being made perfect. We know that this is a sense of what happens in his humanity and his role fulfillment. This is just blessing upon blessing. So do take hold of this chapter. I know there's some tough things in it, but there's blessing in it too. So we move on. And I hope you've enjoyed Hebrews 7.